Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to do a toy post-mortem. A toy post-mortem. That's hard to say. People have asked me about post-mortems on here, and I've talked about them. I've done one meta post-mortem where I took all my games and I said, here's what was consistent, good and bad, about all my games together. But I don't want to review other people's games. I've got a whole video about that. And a post-mortem is essentially a very detailed, critical review of someone's game, because it's here's what they did right and here's what they did wrong. And I've written postmortems for all my games, and I've also written a postmortem for Fallout 3 and 4 for reasons I felt close to them. I felt like I had to get my ideas down. And they are critical, positive, and negative. I've sent them to Bethesda. I don't know who read them. I don't know if they even cared. But it was a way to take my thoughts on that game right after I finished playing them, get them on paper, and go, there. But because those games are made by other people, and my own games are made with other people, I don't want to do postmortems on them, because postmortems, by their very nature, have a section of really negative, critical elements. So instead, I'm going to review my space game that I made here on this channel. You guys have watched me make it. I introduced it in my Insomnia video, and then I had 5 updates about it. So you've seen this toy turn into, I don't want to call it a game, but I call it the shell of a game, ready to be made into a game. I recommend highly that you watch those updates, and I will link them below, and that maybe even you watch my meta postmortem video about all my professional games, so you kind of know what I mean by postmortem. But now let's take a look at my toy and do a postmortem on it. Just let's talk about first what I thought went well on it. First of all, when I first showed it off in the Insomnia video, I said that I was really into Star Raiders in the late 70s. It was a game on my Atari 800. It fascinated me. I was obsessed with it. When I figured out how to get the cartridge onto disk, I did it solely to run it through a decompiler so I could look at the code. I believe I've recognizably recreated my childhood game. If I showed it to someone and said, look, I tried to make Star Raiders in Unity, anyone who had played Star Raiders would go, oh yeah, I kind of see what you did there. And in addition to that, I think I found ways to advance it, to make it a more modern game. Because let's face it, even though Star Raiders in the late 70s was way ahead of its time, it was a 3D, fully 3D game, it was a 70s game. I found ways of making this game look newer, but still having a retro feel to it. And I think one of the ways you might see that is if you look at the smoke trails I put on the ships that make it feel retro, even though it's a modern game. Another thing that I love about making this toy was I learned a bunch of stuff. I'd used Unity to make Pillars of Eternity and then to make Tyranny. But it was a big team. I didn't touch a lot of the engine. So making this game let me learn how to do particle effects, let me learn how to do render trails. I had some of the updates of me talking about, oh my, look what I learned how to do. Which leads me to the fourth thing that I thought was the biggest pro of making this game and in the resulting product, even though it's just a product for me. Sorry. I had a ton of fun making this toy. I'm a very firm believer, too, in that the joy in making a game shows up in the final product. People asked me a few times why I thought all 3 of Troika's games ended up being considered classic, even though they didn't sell well. My Own Temple didn't review well. It's the worst reviewed game of my career, yet a lot of people consider it classic. And I've seen countless reviews that say this is the best D&D rules tabletop like simulation game they've ever seen. And I think it's because all of those games, we had so much fun making it. Yes, it was stressful. Yes, it was long hours. Yes, we got very anxious and had to crunch a lot making it. But we had a lot of joy making it that I hope someday, you guys, if you decide to make games, will experience in your own games, because I think that translates into the resulting game. I believe there's a lot of games that come out now that if you were to talk to the team, did you experience joy while making this game? I think many of them would just look at you funny like, that. What are you talking about? That's a nonsense question. No, and I don't have to. This is my job. I think there's a reason why several games come out and are out for a few weeks and then go away. There's no joy in them. Okay, that was the good stuff. Let's go to the cons. What do I think went badly in making this space game? First of all, right off the bat, I didn't follow my own rule for making a game. I've said it repeatedly. You always go make a setting, then make your story, then make your mechanics. Well, because I was trying to replicate an older game from my childhood, I went straight to mechanics. So now I have a very undeveloped setting. It's roughly sci-fi with spaceships. No idea what the setting really is. And there's absolutely no story. So that leads to the questions of, well, what can go in here? What kind of technology is available? What is the player supposed to be doing? Do you just fly around and pick up upgrades and make your ship better and then beat up more ships? That's the core game loop. But what's the story? What are the mechanics? What are you supposed to be doing? That stuff just doesn't exist because I didn't follow my own rule. Then that leads to stuff I don't like about the game because I didn't follow these rules. I could not tell you what the art style of this game is. I'm not an artist, so these are things that I found online that were art that was available for free or stuff I found in the Unity store. I'm not sure these art styles all belong together. I'm not sure they match. I'm not good at this. And I don't really like what's in there, especially when you get to the UI. I don't really like the UI. The UI is functional. Many people were saying, oh, it needs to be thinner, it needs to be translucent, it needs to be rescalable, it needs to be moved around. I agree. These are all things that I don't like doing. I can do them. Unlike art, I can do them, but I don't like doing it. It's not surprising to me that these two things, art and UI, are the things I don't like about this game. One I can't do, one I don't like doing. Both come from that I have no joy in doing it, and you can kind of see it in the resulting game. And then the third thing that I think went wrong is many of the ideas, my own and viewers who left comments, many ideas on how to extend this game violate its basic design pillar. This was supposed to be a remake of a retro game where you're flying around in space doing things. So many people were like, oh, you need to add, getting out of your ship and exploring space stations or landing on planets and getting out of your ship and exploring that and talking to people and I'm like, those ideas are just not what this game is supposed to be about. First of all, having a 3D person, a person exploring in 3D outside of the ship is like bolting one game onto this game, not just engine-wise, because suddenly you need a person and animations and all that stuff, but it's not really what this game's about. If the you in this game is the ship, suddenly you can get out of the ship, so that's the you in this game. That just breaks stuff. So it's hard to decide how to extend this game, and I think it goes back to my first con, which is I don't have a setting, and I don't have a story. So sure, it felt like it was a grab bag of, hey, how should I advance this game? Of course, it wasn't clear what the design pillars even were, so of course suggestions came from all different directions. Now, I do have ideas on how to extend it, and I decided I'd write them down here so that I don't want to end on a negative note, and I often do this in my postmortems. After getting the good and the bad, I try to end up saying, okay, here's what I liked about it, even given the negative stuff, and here's how I'd like to see things go. And I will even tell you this. One of the things that came out of my postmortems, because people were surprised when I said I liked Fallout 3, and I did. Point. Fallout 4, I liked Fallout 4, but I liked Fallout 3 better, which means if you make a vector from Fallout 3 to Fallout 4, it's pointing in a direction I wouldn't have gone. If instead you make a vector from Fallout 3 to Fallout New Vegas, that's the direction I would have gone. Because I really like New Vegas, and I thought it was a really good evolutionary step from Fallout 3, taking that engine and making a very Fallout-y, a game that was very Fallout-y in the sense of the first two. So, given that that's how I would end up those postmortems, the Fallout 4 postmortem mentioned, this seems to be going in a direction I would not have gone. Here's what I'd say for the ideas for this game. First of all, I'd want distinct races in the game. I love that about Star Control 2, and you can talk to them from the ship. But I had ideas back when Star Trek was on, because Star Trek tended to just have, here's another humanoid with a funny forehead, but they act just like humans. Instead, I want to make the races distinct. Here's a race that is far more bigger sense of humor than ours. They're very, very funny. Everyone in their race is Robin Williams. Then you have a race where they didn't evolve talking, they evolved singing. So contacting them is like suddenly being in a musical, and they sing everything to you. Everything. SOSs get sung to you. Maybe it's a dirge sounding song. Or when they're happy because you finished their quest, they have a really bright song. And they call you the monotone race. They're like, you always talk to us in monotone. That would be a funny thing to do. Now, I can't write music, but it would be a fun thing. I would love to go to a music director and go, want to make a game with me where there's an alien race where every time I contact them, it's a song and the tone of the song is based on their emotional state. I think there's a musical director out there going, I will make that game for you. And of course you can do there's the very logical race. But instead of making it like Vulcans, these would be races that literally don't understand half of what you say because it's just emotional. It's not the whole, we know what you're saying, but wow, you're so emotional. They literally don't understand what you're saying. I think it'd be fun to make races like that. But if you're going to do that, now you have to have some way of talking to them, which means I would like to put in a subspace radio in the ship. Once you have the subspace radio so you can talk to the races, it gives you lots of ways of getting quests. You can hear SOSs, you can pick up chatter, you can hear about a battle all over your subspace radio. Once you've got the radio chattering along, I do think it would be fun to give the ship an AI and to give that AI a personality. I don't know what yet. So it can tell you things. So like when ships arrive and they're firing on you, when your shields go down, when your hull gets damaged, it would be fun to have an AI telling you those things so you don't have to rely on seeing a bar in the corner of the UI go down. I would probably work really hard to give that AI a really interesting personality. And I'd try to come up with something that hasn't been done already. I don't want a snarky AI. I don't want a silly AI. I don't want a HAL 9000 AI. I would work hard to come up with something for that. So once I came up with those ideas, races, radio, AI on the ship, that gave me ways of thinking, oh, here's how I advance the game, and here's how I turn it into a game. Notice that inherent in that, I just mentioned getting quests. Suddenly you have things. You have tasks to do. You have things you can go try to do. Because races are giving them to you, or you're hearing them over the radio. Or your ship can say, this has been damaged. We're going to have to find these materials to fix it. Boom. I now understand ways this game can be advanced. But I think the most critical thing to do is figure out my setting and come up with a storyline. So that's what I would do if this game shell, I could, instead of calling it a toy, I'll call it a game shell, can actually be turned into a game. But that would be my post-mortem for it. And there, I think that's a good example of a post-mortem, and maybe the last time I can talk about that space game for a while.